Very good afternoon, and let's take a look at the markets. Asian markets declined on the back of U.S. tariff threats, while oil prices ticked up slightly. This follows U.S. markets sliding on Friday. Market players are very concerned around U.S. President Donald Trump's posture on materially higher tariffs set to come into effect on the 1st of August, with him having indicated a 30% import tax on Mexican and EU goods. The Nikkei share average declined by 0.3%. The Hang Seng Index rose by 0.26%, while the Shanghai Composite Index gained 0.27%. U.S. markets closed in negative territory on Friday, and all the signs are that they're likely to open in the red later today. As Jones Industrial Average declined by 0.63%, the S&P 500 lost 0.33%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index ended the session down 0.22%. Looking at local indicators, we see that the all-share index is down 0.1% at the moment at 97,113 index points. On the currency front, we see that the rand ending at 17.84 against the US dollar, 20.84 vis-a-vis the euro, and 24.07 cents against the British pound. Looking at commodities, we see that gold is trading at $3,370 an ounce, platinum at $1,388 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is trading at $71.36 a barrel. All right, let's get into it with Warrick Lucas. He's the head of private clients at Vunani Securities. A very good afternoon to you, Warrick. Thanks very much for joining us. So it almost feels like we're returning back to April, when markets plunged on Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement, because he's now raising the tariff numbers yet again, not to mention the stakes.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and it raises exactly the same question that we faced at the time then. And that dilemma was, is there a change in strategy?
So, Warrick, thank you very much for holding on for us. You were beginning to respond to the question that I put to you, that it almost feels as though we're back at April again, given that the stakes are so high and everyone is confused again around what's going to happen with the tariffs.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it raises the same question that we faced at that time. And that dilemma was that there was a question of, well, is there a change in strategic intent, as we see from the mooted 50% tariff on copper imports, or is this just noise, as we see, for example, in the case of the fentanyl beating that Canada is receiving? So is there an actual intention to achieve a negotiated outcome, or is there a bad faith smoke screen designed to ensure a failed outcome? Now, certainly it's going to be a mix of them, but particularly if the latter predominates, then that's certainly concerning for macroeconomic prospects and markets as a whole.
Yeah. Like everybody else, South Africa is hoping that it can negotiate at now the 11th hour to get reprieve on the 30% import tariffs into the United States. If it can't, how is this likely to translate on the local market? And no doubt is translated to some degree, given that that number has come out.
Sure. So I think there might be a little bit of a longish answer on this one, but basically when Trump announced that he would send out formal letters, I mean, it was almost inevitable that tariff discussions could not have been completed, if nothing else, because of the sheer volume of discussions that would be required. I mean, what we can certainly say is the US is turning away from a global rules-based system, such as the WTO, which I guess will do for the rest of us. And they're doing it whether you're friend or enemy, even conducting discussions in kind of a weaponized fashion. I mean, think of Brazil, they're giving a little bit of support there to Bolsonaro, who's on the ropes. I think in terms of how does it affect us, I mean, a lot of it is made about how our trade to the US is in products that are and probably should continue to be able to bypass tariffs. However, the biggest harm will be areas that place, and that's kind of value-added exports, things like vehicle components. I mean, they're not commoditized. They're very hard to replace that trade, whether it's to the US or to anywhere else. And that is a kind of sustainable damage. We obviously hope that an alternative deal can be done And I guess it's going to be a question of, well, what is the actual balance between substance and smoke and mirrors?
Yeah. So last week, OPEC met and they indicated that they expect demand to be lower for oil in the coming years and lower than what they expected this time last year. And yet we're seeing the oil price actually tick up. Just explain to us what's happening with those dynamics.
Okay, so I think there's a mix of dynamics here. I think possibly the predominant one right now, if we're talking very short term, is that I think the US is preparing to put harder restrictions on Russian oil. I think the US has realized that negotiations with Russia really are going nowhere, and that they're kind of stuck with Ukraine, whether they like it or not. I guess the other is a supply and demand issue. I mean, in terms of peak supply, I mean, actual oil supply is definitely getting tighter, and fracking is not hacking as much new market share as it used to, but I think there's enough supply to kind of keep a lid on it. However, there is a bit of a sea change here, I think.
Yeah. Very quickly, Warrick, what are your views on President Ramaphosa's announcement, given that crime is a hot topic for South Africa and its attractiveness as an investment destination?
Well, absolutely. It was necessary to take some kind of action. As you say, I mean, it's a severe limitation on investment. Something did have to be not only done but seen to be done. I guess the full process will be quite a long one, but we certainly need some cleaning up happening in terms of crime. I mean, if nothing else, our little foray to the White House. In the whole world, we saw a massive exposure and a very unfavourable exposure of a high crime rate. It must be dealt with.
Indeed. All right, Warrick, thank you so much for your time and your insights there. That was Warrick Lucas. He's the head of private clients at Vunani Securities.